126. Kids in the Coffee Shop.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Keys to the Shop, where we give you insights, inspiration, and the tools you need to grow as a coffee service professional. My name is Chris DeFurio. I'm your host for the show, and I'm really happy to have you along today. Today we're exploring the topic of kids in the coffee shop. And right away, I'd like to thank my little guy, Roman, for the great title introduction. He is 5 and he loves visiting coffee shops, of course, and drinking decaf cappuccinos. I'm so proud. But anyway, I'll save you from all of my fatherly gushings. But this episode is going to explore the pros and cons, the ins and outs of having kids in the coffee shop by hearing from 2 different owners of 2 different cafes on each side of the kids in the coffee shop equation. So this is going to be interesting. Now, right away, I'd like to say thank you to our sponsors here at Keys to the Shop, starting with Prima Coffee. So Prima is a leading specialty coffee equipment supplier who curates the best equipment from around the world to fit perfectly with the needs of both their enthusiast and professional customers. They love helping you succeed, whether that means in your cafe or at home. It's really what drives them, and I've worked with them over the years, and I've always enjoyed it. So if you're looking for the best equipment and expert assistance to go along with it, look no further than prima-coffee.com. And now, through until December 31st, customers can receive a Mazzer Mini electric grinder in silver entirely for free when they purchase an Astoria espresso machine. All you do is add the machine and the grinder to your cart, and you'll see instant savings. This is a pretty huge deal. I mean, we're talking about a free grinder here, so definitely hit them up over at prima-coffee.com to check out more about that or any other home or commercial coffee equipment needs you might have. Thank you very much, Prima, for your support of Keys to the Shop. This show is also brought to you by the fine folks over at Pacific Foods. They are behind the Barista Series line of non-dairy performance beverages that are designed specifically for professional baristas and the standards for excellence that they demand. So you could be using an almond milk, soy, coconut, rice, or oat milk, their newest product, and its ability to take the heat from steaming, produce an unmatched silky texture, and keep the flavor balance focus on coffee makes it a perfect choice for your cafe's menu. Pacific is a huge supporter of specialty coffee and the barista community. These products are just a testament to that fact, and I would encourage you, go to pacificfoods.com. Learn more about the Barista Series line of non-dairy performance beverages and see how they can elevate the non-dairy offerings you provide your guests in your cafe. So thank you very much, Pacific, for your support of Keys to the Shop. All right, so like I said, today we're going to be talking about kids in the coffee shop, and, depending on how you look at it, you either have the pleasure of dealing with kids in the coffee shop, or you have to deal with kids in the coffee shop, or you'd rather not deal with kids in the coffee shop. But at the end of this episode today, I hope you gain some clarity on how to approach this with your operation, or how you will approach it with your future coffee operation. Because how we deal with this and what we plan to do and what's appropriate is really a question of what your vision is and how you want your coffee shop to be known and what the community needs. So the way this episode is structured and what I thought would be really fun is to talk with 2 operations on different sides of the coin. One is a shop that focuses on serving only adults and has a no children policy in the cafe. And the other cafe we'll talk to is very much focused on welcoming kids into the coffee shop. We're going to hear their stories, and we're going to hear about their businesses and their rationale behind their decisions, advice they have to give us about the road they chose to take. And at the end, I will come back and we will talk, you and I, about best practices that we've learned from these owners and the way we can move forward as coffee professionals who are serving our community as well. So to start off, we're going to be talking with Alan Andrews. He is the owner of the Old Barracks Coffee Roastery in Tipperary, Ireland. Alan is a father and was the operator and founder of Delish Cafe in Ireland, a very family-friendly series of cafes. In his career, he has also started the coffee education and training business Coffee Culture, and has most recently opened the Old Barracks Coffee Roastery that is designed to be a destination cafe to give people an immersive coffee experience right alongside the specialty roasting operation. The Old Barracks made headlines when it installed a policy upon opening that the cafe was for adults only. And we will be talking more about the vision and the founding of the Old Barracks and diving into the idea behind the policy, why it was set, and what it's meant for business since starting. Now, on the other end of the equation, we have the owners of Lucabe Coffee in Columbus, Indiana, Alyssa and Tyler Hodge. Alyssa and Tyler have always loved coffee. Lucabe is their first coffee business, and they founded it back in the spring of 2017. It is also Columbus, Indiana's first truly specialty coffee shop. It has been growing incredibly and has been very well received by the community and won the Next Generation Business of the Year award in 2017. From the beginning, both Alyssa and Tyler wanted to create a family-friendly and kid-inclusive space, and they went so far as to design a very large 2-level play area complete with toy espresso machine in the middle of their shop. And in our conversation, we talk about their business, their vision, and the decision to be so intensely family-oriented in their operation. So here we go. Let's talk with Alan Andrews of the Old Barracks Coffee Roastery and Alyssa and Tyler Hodge of Lucabe Coffee, all about kids in the coffee shop. Alan, welcome to Keys to the Shop. Thank you for joining me.
Chris, I'm excited to be here. Thank you very much for having me as a guest. It's great.
Yeah, honored. And I wanted to just start by getting to know a little bit about your business. How long have you been roastery and cafe? How long have you been open and running?
Okay, so we're now just at the end of 2018, and we started roasting in January of 2018 for ourselves. So before that, I had another coffee business which still exists. That's called Coffee Culture, and that is an education and training business. And that company has 30 or 40 wholesale customers whom we used to outsource the coffee roasting for. So we had a partner company that would roast all the coffee for us and look after procurement and procurement, roasting, packing, and distribution. But we got to a stage where we were too big, I guess, for them, and we needed to take more control of the offering. So I had saved a bit of money, so I decided to open the Old Barracks Roastery a couple of years ago. But it took me a couple of years to get the whole offering together. So it wasn't until January this year that we started to roast for ourselves. So we roasted in January, and we've been roasting since then, and now we have the coffee bar also open, and that opened in July. So that'll give you the full picture. Is
it an old barracks, literally?
Yeah, it's an old police barracks, an old Garda barracks, as they call the police here, Garda. So it goes back to 1900s. From 1900 to 1927, it was the RIC, the Royal Irish Constabulary Garda Barracks. And it was also a nuns' respite centre. It has also been an entrepreneur's centre, a centre for entrepreneurial development, where you might have, like years ago, you might have had what we call nowadays hot desks. But years ago, they had a similar kind of setup for incubation of small businesses. It was a nuns' respite centre, did I say that already? And it was a family home going back to the early 1700s, 1800s. So the building it has a great legacy, and it will be 300 years old in 2020.
So you've been in the coffee business for a while, and you obviously are familiar with coffee culture and coffee bars and the operations that go into them. And I wonder, what is the mission and vision of the Old Barracks right now?
So what I wanted to create was a destination for people who are coffee curious. And I suppose when people look at setting up their own businesses and creating their own unique selling points, or what it is that makes them different and who they're going to target We like to look at businesses in terms of whether they're looking to create an experience or a convenient offering. And I think specialty coffee or well brewed coffee should certainly be more of an experience than convenience. And if you're in a city centre, that might get diluted because there are a lot of people trying to offer an experience. So what we could afford to do was really try and create and to manifest deliberately an experience for the customer. And so what I wanted to do, the vision was to create that destination for the coffee curious. So people who were interested in actually giving an hour of their day or 2 hours or a little bit of time, a little bit more than the average time to be, to consider driving to us for a cup of coffee and experiencing that and enjoying it and leaving maybe a little bit more informed if they chose to be informed, but if not, just to have a really nice coffee experience. So we have a seating area which seats 24 to 28 people, which is a side room. And in that room, we clear that out on a Tuesday, Saturday, and Sunday, and we offer that room on a Tuesday morning currently for mindfulness for an hour before the shop opens, and also for yoga on Saturdays and Pilates on a Sunday. So we're very much oriented towards the adult activities, so to speak. And in the coffee bar, then we have so you can see in the conservatory area, there's the Gießen, 15 kilo Gießen roaster. There's loads of green coffee stored there. There's about 2,500 kilos of green coffee on display and in storage. And then we have the counter, which is a mod bar gravimetric espresso machine. And that then we have 10 countries of origin on offer. So when people come to the space, there is a deliberate point of contact at the till, which is the only place you can order through the iPad, and you get to scroll down through all the coffees and discover the flavor profiles. And at that point, then the barista or the till person will explain the coffees to you. So all we do then is we brew. As I said earlier on, you might have a group of 4, and they'll all have a different. They might have a different coffee experience. So there might be a Guatemalan flat white and a Rwandan brew. Like somebody might have a V60 of the Rwanda or a Kalita, and then you'll have probably Brazil Americano and a Colombian latte or something. So you can imagine what the tray looks like. There's 4 different drinks, 4 different countries of origin. So that's our setup. And it's so from that point of view, it's quite a unique space. And what we are trying to do is elevate that coffee experience to, deliberately give them, slow down the interaction, to deliberately give them a range of coffees to taste, and for them to make a conscious decision about where they want to go in terms of flavor. So a lot of the time people say, oh, we're very new. I don't know anything about coffee. I don't know what. You pick something for me. And then we turn it back on them and we say, well, do you want something strong or medium or mild? And then they go, oh, something medium. So now all of a sudden they've made a conscious decision that they're going medium in terms of flavor, intensity, or roast. But that's what we do there. And then everything is just, brew to order and then drop to the table. So it's very much a table served environment.
Wow, congrats. So having a destination cafe where that's the goal is very specific, and kudos to you for that goal. Is that in particular, that vision, something that is behind the age restriction? Let's talk about the kind of famous, I would say, age restriction, adults only policy in your cafe. Was that part of the reason for instituting that?
Well, yeah. I mean, I don't quite know what we're going to call it because legally now we have some conflicts. So we have a recommended age for customers, which is over 18. And in my history of opening businesses and creating products for customers and solving solutions, which is what being an entrepreneur is all about, I have realized that the more focused I go and the more focused I try to define my target market, the more successful we are as a business. And I'll give you a really good example. So when I started the coffee culture business 10 years ago, and we were getting inquiries from restaurants who would sell maybe 10 kilos of coffee a month, and they would like barista training and bars, we would try to take on that business. And after 2 to 3 years, I was getting very frustrated, and I made a strategic decision that we would only sell to businesses where coffee was the core product, or it was a coffee and offering. So maybe, it could be like a coffee and cake or coffee and donut type offering, but our core customer needed to be absolutely more focused on that, and not to sell to restaurants, and not to sell to pubs. And when I started focusing on those type of customers with the coffee culture business, I realized that we were winning those kind of customers. So when I was defining my ideal customer for the roastery, who I wanted to attract were people between the ages of 25 and 45 who were looking to open a cafe and perhaps buy wholesale coffee from us, and were interested in learning more about coffee. And sometimes they would be the same person. So it might be that same person, but also they might just be people who are, between that age bracket, 25 to 45, and are interested in learning or tasting or exploring coffee flavors. So I suppose I made a strategic decision that that's what the customer will look like, and that's who we're going to target. And so we have nothing on the premises that suits anybody, that is below the age of 25 or 18, really. 18, 25. It's really, we want people who drink coffee to come to our coffee bar. Mm-hmm. So most people that I know, that like most kids that I know in that age bracket of even 18 to 25 are visiting cafes, which I think is awesome. So they are the Starbucks type customer, the Costa type customer, and they might start off at 15 or 16 of starting to go to cafes with their friends and having vanilla flavored drinks or mochas or hot chocolates, and they're getting used to that cafe environment. And as they get older, their palates are more developed, so they're getting more and more interested in actual coffee or specialty coffee. So now we find that our core customer is between certainly they're certainly 20 to from 20 up, and not younger at all.
Okay, so a very specific target market, and I imagine that you get all types, though, not just people who are like super gung-ho for coffee, but convenience customers too. I imagine there's going to be a mix no matter what you do, because you are technically still open to the public, and coffee house is kind of that third place, that public gathering place. Is that the case with the Old Barracks?
Absolutely, yeah. And I know that. So I know that, at the weekend now, it's funny because the staff are slagging me, saying that we're now, some of the weekends, because we got a lot of press recently, is that it's more of an older person's venue now because people are late 50s, 60s going out for cappuccino and cake, and that's what they do. And as much as I want it to be super focused, and if I had 10 of my dream customers a day and they were all just people who wanted to open coffee shops and buy our coffee as wholesale suppliers, that would be awesome. But the reality is that we are catering to a broader market. We are catering to people who will visit us every day. So the whole mystery around, this coffee destination or a destination for the coffee curious kind of fades off when you've been there, or if you're having meetings there every day, so there's a bit of that as well. And that we can handle that as well. So you recognize the people who are the regulars, and they come in and they'll call their coffee by name. They'll ask for the Colombian flat white because that's what they like to drink. And somebody else will come in and have their their Ethiopian Chemex. So we get that as well. But for the most part, actually, that's our customer base. It's people who are there for an experience. They're not necessarily there to be educated in a geeky, obtrusive way. They just want to have a really nice coffee and learn a little bit about why if they've got 4 coffees on the table and they're all cappuccinos, why they all taste different.
So the age restriction is something that came about preemptively, or was it something that you saw in the cafe as it was opening that you said, well, this is detracting from the focus that I want for the business, so we need to stop it now?
Oh, totally preempted. I saw it before we opened, and I was very clear. So let me roll back 15 years now, when my daughter was born, and we opened our first cafe, which was called Delish Cafes in Limerick, and we had a very much targeted a kids menu. We had crayons and coloring pencils and coloring books and small box of toys for kids. And we opened a small chain of those cafes, which continues to run, but they started in 2003, and at its peak, there were 4 cafes in 2008. So all the time we were catering for children, but they were very much coffee shops, and there was a very broad menu. There was beans on toast for the kids, and there were homemade a bean cassoulet with treats, so for the adults. So the kind of breakfasty brunch things were there to cater for the whole family, and that offering was very much available for families, and that was the thing that families would do at the weekends: go for brunch and have breakfast together as a group. But when we opened the roastery and the coffee bar, what I wanted to create was something that was very much unique, and I didn't want to be cleaning up food all over the floors, and I didn't want to be catering for. I know it sounds like, but that's the reality of it, and I'm being very honestly about it. I didn't want to have to do that, because that was only. That part is only taking my staff away from speaking to somebody who does want to know what MASL means, or what a cup score is. And now we have conversations at the bar where people go, what does 1500 MASL mean? And we can point to the Moylussa mountain range across the river and say, well, Moylussa is 550 meters above sea level, and this coffee comes from a farm that's 1500 meters above sea level. And all of a sudden we can have those conversations, and we're not distracted by making a hot chocolate for kids, or splitting 2 baby chinos for the table and putting our energy into that. So we can really focus on the customer engagement piece, and we're deliberately excluding offerings and the availability of offerings, so we can deliberately create an experience on the other end.
So this was something that, from what I've understood about the process, a large portion of people responding to a poll you put out actually voted for this focus, for this age restriction. Describe to us what that process was like.
So I suppose the introduction, or the how would I say it? Getting the feedback from people, or announcing it domestically that I was considering doing this, was basically picked up by the local, I suppose, the domestic papers and local radio stations, and one of the main online journal, the journal.ie, picked up the story, and they asked their readership. So over 11,000 people voted about for the concept, and 8,500 were for it. So it was an overwhelming response that people thought that this was a great idea, and parents and non-parents, or uncles and aunties, or everybody really had their say. And it's like everything, Chris. At the end of the day, you're never going to create a product that suits everyone. So regardless of, even if we had created a cafe where we did try and offer a kids menu, it would never be sufficient as a kids menu. It would be a gesture towards the kids menu. And even if we went the other way and tried to say to people that this was a coffee shop, the menu itself would be too restricted, because we only sell, well, I say only in the sense that we only sell coffee and cake, but we have 10 origins on the bar at any one time. And we have, a half dozen cakes that are all gluten-free, dairy-free, vegan-friendly, and made in-house. So we have a very expansive offering for the 2 things that we offer, which is coffee and cake, but that's all we do. So we put out, the poll went out. There was loads of kick back, both positive and negative, more positive. And since we've opened, for the most part, like all we have is parents coming to us saying that this is great. This is my third space, as you alluded to there, the Ray Oldenburg version of what is a coffee shop, a third space and somewhere to escape and somewhere to get that mindfulness or that just that hour to yourself, where now you can actually have a great coffee, because great coffee is so hard to find still, and it can be in a peaceful environment. So I'm really blown away actually by the feedback that we get and how appreciative people are of the concept.
Well, that's really great to hear, and certainly is the prerogative of the owner to design a particular experience for their ideal clientele. And like you said, you can't really please everybody. And, working in cafes for, as long as you and I both have, there is a certain kind of chaos that comes with having large families in a cafe, and we have some episodes alluding to how to deal with some of that chaos. But we do by default, whether we decide to or not, eliminate the possibility of somebody coming to our cafe and getting a particular menu item that we don't carry. And so it just seems like you've made it up front that this is your restriction and this is your focus. More than a restriction, it's a focus on what you include and what you cater to, not what you don't cater to. What is it that you've experienced on the downside of this that is difficult to deal with as a cafe space? Because there is this tide of expectation that cafes are family places because bars are not. That's the way, at least the way I view it, is you don't bring your child into a bar necessarily, but I can bring them to the coffee shop when I'm out shopping and etc.
So I suppose the negative or the challenging parts for us and for the staff are when people knowingly come along and they decide to challenge the policy. So that's a very difficult position for us to be put in. And if they knowingly challenge the policy but don't say anything, we won't say anything to them. We just let it slide. But it does make it awkward. And we don't want to go down the route of it's a dangerous space. There's a live coffee roasting. There's a 15 kilo Gießen on site that is live and hot. We have a very old building, so it's also quite an open space building, and you could in theory, walk up and down our there's a beautiful stone marble staircase, so you could go up and down that quite freely because for fire restrictions, all of the corridors remain open. The roaster's on. It can be hot. There's in the back room there's a heat sealing machine, which if somebody was really curious, they might put their hand into, because there may not always be a member of staff in the back room, and that moment that they decide to go out the front and cover somebody's break, and some kid runs into the heat sealing machine and decides to press the button. I mean, that's my worst nightmare. So we have these scenarios where things can happen. They can happen, in the flick of an eye, and I suppose we don't want to be having to deal with that if we can avoid it. I had a couple in at the very start who were very coffee curious, and we were serving alternative milks, and this girl and her partner have a little girl called Molly, and he came in and he got a coffee to go and a cake, and they sat in their car, had the coffees, and she came in 20 minutes later, and she said that was one of the best coffees I've ever had. Like, it was oat milk and it was a Colombian espresso, and then she had a gluten-free brownie, and she was like, even though I sat in my car to have that coffee, it was just brilliant, and I'm going to get another coffee. So as she spoke to me, turns out she used to work in Starbucks, and her boyfriend, I think his name was Chris also, was looking after Molly outside, and then Molly came into the building, went back out of the building, came back into the building, and all of a sudden, about 3 minutes later, he was asking her, "Where's Molly?" And they were both engaged with the whole coffee conversation that neither of them realized that she had gone running around the building. So we have a large car park at the back. The child had run to the front of the building up onto the main steps, where we have two very large lions. If you've ever seen the La Marzocco coffee equipment, it's a lion that looks like that Florence emblem. So they just happened to be on the building when we got it. And she went up to see the lions, but right in front of the lions is the main road. And I could just picture when I found her, because I ran to find her, because I heard the front door going, which has a bell on it, and I knew that that's where she'd gone. So this is what happens. You end up getting totally engrossed in a conversation with a customer, and they are completely, they can get completely lost in the conversation, and they're not aware of where their child might go. So it's kind of, that's exactly what we want to happen in terms of the engagement, but we don't want them, not paying attention to the kids. Yeah. So they're just real, like that's a real scenario that we have had happen in the bar. When people arrive on with kids, we serve them coffee to go, and sometimes they might ask, can they sit in? And we won't say no, but we'll just say, yeah, but just not at the bar, and it is a quiet space for adults, so we'd appreciate if you could respect that. And that's what we try and do. What we try and do is just elevate the coffee experience. Because I think it has become, even though it's specialty, and when you see, particularly in Dublin, where it's specialty coffee, but there's a coffee shop on every corner, but then it just keeps getting diluted down to convenience and convenience and convenience.
Yeah, and understood. And it definitely seems like the space isn't necessarily built for safety of children. Of course, with the roastery and keeping things open, and it's some semi-industrial. So it does make a lot of sense in focusing on that experience. Again, that's great. So I wonder, as we learn about your experiences here and the road that you've chosen to go down, and it seems like it's working well for you, what would be your recommendation to other entrepreneurs, so people who are either running cafes or thinking about opening cafes, in terms of how to go about making a decision and how they handle children in the cafe?
Oh, well, I suppose in my experience, what I've noticed is that some cafes don't want children, but they don't say that. So what they do is they don't have an offering available for children, and they don't have high chairs available, and they make it difficult for parents. I like, the real challenge here is that there's a human rights issue, and there's a discrimination issue, and one would have to be very careful about how you do treat a family, and it's something we're very mindful of. So we're not in a position where we're flat out refusing people because they arrive along with children. We're asking people to respect a policy and a focused decision that we've made, and we've yet to we've yet to see, I suppose, the full impact of how that's going to affect people and how people respond to that. So far, it's been wholly positive, and we have found that for the main, people who are adults and have children, whether they're their own children or their nieces and nephews, have chosen not to come to us with them and go elsewhere. But when they're without their children or their nieces and nephews, that they do come to us. So I think for coffee shop owners, it's a very gray area. I think as restaurateurs, if you have a restaurant, it's very easy to do because you can price gouge. You can just put your prices to a particular point, not have half portions available, and not have baby bowls available, or some kind of food offering that's going to cater to families. And you quite quickly can differentiate yourself as an adult type of venue or a family type venue. So I think it's quite case specific. But I think this is where the challenge is in terms of our migration as a culture in Ireland, is going from the pubs and always having events on in hotels and pubs, and where they've been alcohol-based environments, now what I've tried to create is an alcohol-free environment where it's also child-free, so that only adults can hang out there. And that's certainly it's certainly not the done thing. So I I don't really know the answer, Chris. To what would I advise people? Like, but it's a bit like anything. You need it's a bit like anything. When anything, you need followers. You need a leader and a follower. I'm not saying I'm a leader, but definitely we're the first people to do it, or to try and create an atmosphere or an environment. And the feedback, like overwhelming feedback, is that this is something that the majority, like 87, I think, or 86.5% of the people out of 11,000, like, said that this is somewhere that they would go. And like, when you're looking at a presidential election in some countries, that is an overwhelming majority of an answer. Mm-hmm. And when I saw that, I was really surprised. I thought it might be more of a 50-50 split, but in my heart, I felt that actually it wasn't. In my heart, I felt it was somewhere that we needed to have, because I have had my own experiences with my own kids where I've done two things. I've gone to cafes where I want to have that family kind of morning where we have our breakfast and I have a coffee and they have a juice and we do that whole family thing. And I've gone to cafes where I just want to have a coffee and I'm happy for them to play on their iPads and just, be themselves for 20 minutes, half an hour, and we just have to kill half an hour somewhere. So I'm very aware of what it's like to be a parent and to go out to cafes. But I don't want to go to a pub every time I want to, have a chat with someone, and if I don't want to go for coffee. So I think the destinations are limited. Certainly here in Irish culture, the opportunities are limited for people who don't want to go, and it's not always the cafes. So where else do you go? Mm-hmm. And the cafe's full of kids. You can't have my mate can't talk to me about his breakdown if that's what he wants to talk to me about, or about how things are going with his partner, or in a cafe where there's kids around and there's all this noise and distraction. So and you may necessarily not want to be in a pub to do that, and it could be you want to do that conversation at 10 o'clock in the morning. So where do you do it? So I suppose that's where I see it going, and that's where I would like to, I suppose, pitch it, for us, and maybe because we've started it, people might follow, but there is a legal challenge there as well that you'd have to be mindful of.
Absolutely, there's always that nuance to be aware of, and it sounds like you've chosen to serve that market with your space, the market that wants that space to be separate from kids. And as a parent myself, I definitely sympathize with that, because there is, necessarily some spaces where you do want to be by yourself or have adult conversations with other adults, because your conversations are predominantly with smaller people. And,
But also, Chris, like if we went for coffee and I have two kids. How many kids have you got?
Oh, I've just got the one.
You got the one. So if we went for coffee, you and I, and we brought our kids, so there would be three kids in, there, like we would be conscious of what they're doing, and we wouldn't be focused on our conversation. So we'd be trying to have a conversation like this, and there'd be one eye on one kid, another eye on another one. We'd see what they're maybe collectively doing. If they say to us, "We're just going over here for a few minutes, we'll be back," you're not really. We're not focused on our conversation. So actually, we're not getting quality time together as two guys having a chat, and we're conscious of what they're doing. And that, like around February, March, and April, where I was considering this approach, like I had a couple of experiences where I'd met friends with kids, and that happened. I had another mate who did have quite a severe depression, and we wanted to go somewhere for a coffee and have a conversation, and we actually couldn't find anywhere in his neighborhood where we could actually just go and have an 11 o'clock chat without, like over the top noise. And my own kids then said to me, we don't want to be going to the cafe on your day off, because all you do is chat to the other, customers or adults and ignore us. And I was, all of these things put together, I was thinking, this makes an awful lot of sense, to do this. So yeah, it is trying to trying to create that space and trying to do that. It seems to be a much needed opportunity for people.
Well, it sounds like you're serving that market well, and it sounds like there is this need that you are providing a solution for. So I wish you all the best in that, and I really appreciate you taking the time to discuss this with us, because it's definitely an important issue to articulate and to ponder rather than just to let blow by unaddressed necessarily. So how can we find out more about what you do, get in contact with you and your company?
People will find us at theoldbarracks.ie, which is our website, but also and mostly on Instagram at the Old Barracks Coffee Roastery. And we're also on Facebook at facebook.com/the Old Barracks. And of course, people can find me, Alan_Andrews_IE. I'm on Instagram as well if they want to get in touch. We do a lot of work for consultation for cafes that are opening, and again, trying to find their voice and to deliver their experience, whether that's a convenient or an experiential offering, and we help people with that. So I'd be delighted for people to reach out for me. And finally, we've launched a podcast on how to open a roastery, so people might find that beneficial as well.
Excellent.
Yeah, so that's with two podcasts: how to open a roastery and starting your own cafe. So they're pieces of information that people might find very beneficial.
Excellent. Thank you so much for diving into that a little bit more and telling us some of the stuff that you do behind the bar, and also just talking about this issue with us again. I definitely would want to stop by and experience what you've set up in your cafe if I were in your area. So I wish you the best, and thanks again for just discussing this important issue. It seems like you are just focused and serving your customers very well. So thank you.
Thanks, Chris. Thanks very much. And thanks for having us on the show.
Alyssa, Tyler, welcome to Keys to the Shop. Glad to have you on the show.
Thank
Chris.
you.
This is really nice for me to have you on. I've been to your cafe. I really love what you're doing out there in Columbus, Indiana. Well done. How long have you been in business?
We've been in business a little over a year and a half, opened in May of 2017.
So things have been going fairly well from, I know what you've told me and what I've seen. It's been pretty well received in the community.
Yes, it's gone beyond our expectations. We had no idea of the amount of response that we would see, and so it's been an exciting ride. Columbus has really embraced the cafe in a multitude of ways.
Yeah, I totally agree.
Good to hear. And tell us a little bit about Lucabe, your shop, the vision of your cafe. What are your goals for, what you do with serving your community? Like, when we come into your shop, what would we experience?
Yeah, so when we first set out, Tyler and I sat down to think through, truly, I didn't even know you really needed a mission statement, but he was like, nope, my MBA tells me we need a mission statement. So we sat down and we just started intentionally thinking through it. And it actually is on point where, a year and a half later now, or however long we've been planning this, or been in the thick of it, even before the doors even opened, this mission statement, honestly, it has rung true. It's to serve Columbus, Indiana with the highest customer care, the best specialty coffee with an amazing environment to gather community. And when we kind of get feedback from our community, it honestly hits all of those notes almost every single time. Almost all of our reviews hit these notes. So
yeah, so I'd say that's the vision, is we want to serve, and we didn't want to limit that to any particular person or demographic. And so we said, all are welcome in the cafe, and we want to be able to be an extra place where people really feel almost as if they were just walking right into our home. And so that was kind of the vision. And that's, that there's an order to that mission statement, highest customer care being first and foremost, even above great specialty coffee. Now, you have to back it up with a great product, but the interactions you get with the staff is by far the number one feedback that we get, that people really, really enjoy about our cafe.
That's so great. And you're providing a service that, from what I know about the area, that kind of specialty environment is, I don't know that there's really much in the way of that expression of specialty coffee around where you are.
Yeah, there really isn't. I think that's half of the reason why we were driven to open it, because we longed for it so much ourselves. And we knew that we weren't experiencing what we wanted to, and so we just made it ourselves.
Yeah, and Columbus is a really unique town. It's got a really high concentration of advanced degrees because of Cummins being the world headquarters here. And so I think there's an expectation of high quality that the people of this town really prefer. And there wasn't something that was meeting all the things that we knew specialty coffee could really do and highlight. And so when we thought about creating something, we knew we had to go in all the way and do it really well. And I think that's one of the main contributors to the success.
I think another thing that we thought through was, because Columbus is a smaller town, it still has the world at its fingertips, because Cummins engine brings in so many people from across the world that we basically, when we started to think through it, we thought, okay, we need to think big city. We need to think the larger picture of specialty coffee, not what maybe you would find in the typical small town.
But we wanted to have that small town feel. Columbus is a small, big town in that sense. And so we wanted to replicate that in the cafe, meaning we wanted to have all the amenities and the quality of a large city cafe, but in the service and so forth, but also make it feel warm and inviting, so that the people from Germany, when they visit, can put our espresso up against anybody in the world and feel like that they are getting a really good shot.
Sure. That's really unique. Wow. What a great opportunity. And what is it that you offer right now? You are, espresso drinks, obviously, baked goods. What is the experience that you give people when they come in?
Yeah. So we thought about that a lot when we started opening the cafe, of, do we want to do the non-flavored drinks and be really restricted in our menu, or do we want to go and do all the crazy combinations of flavors that some cafes do? We tried to find a good middle road, because we knew at the time we were going in, there were 3 Starbucks in town, and now there are 5 Starbucks in town. And some of the ones that are in town are the top selling in the region. And so we knew that there was a demand for the alternative drinks besides just cappuccinos and doppios and macchiatos and so forth. So we wanted to hit that demographic, but we also have a full-scale kitchen. And so we knew to really take advantage of that space that we were in, we wanted to do most of our baking in-house. And so we started small with some baked goods, and then now we're doing sandwiches. We're getting into the catering business and really branching out, utilizing that space in the back.
Great. So a lot of in-house stuff and just a great high-end specialty coffee menu. And you don't roast your own, you're a wholesale account?
Yes. So our roaster is actually down there in Louisville. Sunfrost Micro Roastery. So yeah, we chose them because it was, we saw that Louisville was doing things in coffee, doing big things. And us being between Louisville and Indianapolis, we knew we wanted to draw into a well-established shop that could also help cultivate our vision for coffee and help come alongside us in that.
Yeah, and the people at Sunnergoss are so amazing too, and they really came alongside us like a brother in the beginning, and just helping us along with all the thoughts from cafe layout to equipment and so forth. And it's just been a great partnership. And so I think that's one reason why for us, it's like, let them focus on excellent coffee roasting and let us focus on excellent customer service.
Awesome. That's great. They're great people. One of the things about service that is unique in how you have the world at your fingertips. So a lot of high-powered people, also mixing with just local folk coming into your shop, and everybody experiences this hospitality. And there's this aspect of your hospitality that's I think is really unique, and it's this emphasis. What we're talking about today, this emphasis on welcoming families and providing a space where people feel comfortable to bring their kids and their families, to the degree that you actually have a what I think is probably the largest, most developed play area, complete with toy espresso machine. Tell us about that. Like, what inspired you to start with such an emphasis on including kids in the cafe?
Well, I think when we thought about who we wanted to serve, we wanted to think more broadly than a traditional cafe, and so I'll go into that more in a second. But fast forwarding today, it's really cool to see our staff say, "Did you know that was the president of Cummins?" Right, and then in the other end of the cafe, there's kids playing. And so, that dynamic you mentioned of having high-ranking people of corporate, executives come into the shop and really interact with everybody else in the community is really cool.
I think one thing initially when we started to think through our concept, a couple things came into mind. Was why are we doing what we're doing? And it was because of our family. Lucabe literally, well, now we have a fourth child. She's like 8 weeks old.
Yes, congratulations.
Thank you.
We started the shop with 3 kids, Lucas, Calvin, Bella. And so we smushed their names together because we knew why we were doing it was for our family. Moving forward through that, we started to think through what are we trying to do with this? And it really led to the point of the reason why we wanted the coffee shop so much is because we almost felt like we grew up in the coffee shop. Like that was the beginning of coffee, was, when we were in college. And so we grew those pivotal years inside of coffee shops. And I think now that we have kids, we realized, well, dang it, it's almost like we're not welcome anymore.
Well, it may not be not welcome, but it's
not as comfortable.
When our whole generation of people are now having lots of kids and they go to a coffee shop, well, it's not, they may not say that they're not welcome. Maybe some would say that, but most wouldn't. But it's not really fostering or catering.
It's not welcoming.
Yeah. At the very minimum, you feel a little awkward because the kids have nothing else to do. And if anybody has kids out there, that they don't sit still very long. And so we wanted to have a place where the kids felt just as welcomed as the adults did, because we wanted to create a place where the parents felt comfortable that they could come in and enjoy a cup of coffee while the kids played. And ultimately we are, the long-term vision is we're creating mini baristas. So it's a long-term staffing play. No, just kidding.
So you are kind of creating future consumers in a way, growing up in the coffee bar, and hopefully their memory of your shop is a pleasant one. So when you opened with this, how was it received? Like, what kind of a reaction did parents and families have to this?
Okay, so yeah. So we've kept everything very honest, and in our social media, we let people along on the ride. And so as I would design the whole cafe, I would post things online and let people see the progress. People started to... We were
a crowdfunded cafe in part to raise funds for the capital. And so that was one of the reasons keeping them engaged along the process.
Yeah. And one of the comments early on was, "Oh, during your crowdfunding, you said there'd be a play space. I thought it would be bigger.
Oh.
And so I think that kind of, and I kept hearing that. And so we realized, okay, we've got to do more than just a, 6 cube shelf with toys on it. Like, these moms are really, really wanting to participate in this. And so we ended up, one of our friends is an interior designer, and she said, I'll just take on that space all by myself. And she created literally do you know the size of the room?
I would say it's probably about a 12 by 12 space.
So it's a 12 by 12 space. With
2 levels in it.
She was able to create a second level for older kids that's reading, more calm, a lower level that has it's literally called Little Lucabes, that has a espresso machine, a kitchen, and all kinds of little things. And then on the outside of that, there's even a little area for the kids that can't walk in a padded space, all within a 12 by 12.
What we wanted to make sure it wasn't is like the Chick-fil-A play space, right? We love Chick-fil-A and we love our kids to go there, but we didn't want it to be a unsupervised, go at it, crazy yelling and screaming type of space.
Mainly the reason why I didn't want that is because we think that a community is a community of all ages, of all demographics. And so from the littlest community member to the oldest community member, how can we coexist? And how can we do life around each other in the context of the cafe as well?
That's fair. So this space is giant, and obviously people are taking advantage of it probably from day one. What was that like in terms of you planned this? You didn't want it to be what you just said, this, screaming and loud and unsupervised, and how has it actually turned out?
So the first month was rough. There was a lot of staying on top of the rules. When we first opened, we handed rules out to every mom that had kids with them, or parent or nanny or whatever that had kids with them. We recognized that after the first few days that they weren't necessarily even, we would find the papers on the floor. We were like, okay, we're missing something. And so
and one thing we found, we had a bunch of toys in there, and some of those toys were like metal die-cast trucks that we were thinking, wow, those would be great, rugged toys that won't damage. But when the kids go up to the second level and throw them off at the kids on the bottom level, well, maybe we need soft toys.
And less. We decided that a very narrow amount of items in that space, but that were really intentional items. Things that attach to the wall, things that attach to the little Lucabe bar. We literally drilled the espresso machine into the bar, as well as the register. We have a register there. And so that first week we learned a lot. We realized that no one was going to read the rules that we were handing out. Even though they were posted on a paper on the outside, what we decided to do is on the inside of the play space, we have a hand letterer that does all of our hand lettering in the shop, and she just took a giant permanent marker, and made it look as classy as possible, because we want the whole shop to flow. We don't want it to look like a kid's space. We want it to all feel like one. But she just wrote the rules in really pretty letters on the wall.
And that helped a decent amount. And then I think there's still the occasional reminding folks of what's going on. And so I think one thing, you got to manage expectations. And so the staff were initially concerned about it, but we tried to cast our vision for that inclusive environment for families, and say, you know what, sometimes there are going to be some screams and some yells, but hopefully that doesn't last too long.
Yeah, I did notice. So our staff in the very beginning, we would all kind of get a little bit of anxiety when we'd have to go back and be like, hey guys, it's a little loud. We have to make sure that we're respectful of everyone that's in the cafe. We do want you to be able to play and have fun. It got a little terrifying to say that because some parents didn't understand. And I think what ended up happening was they got to see us over time, recognize that when the parents are being intentional and attentive to their children, even if their children happen to be a little bit louder, we could see that on majority of the parents' face, they were devastated that their parent or that their child was not following the quote unquote rules. And so we would see those moms kind of struggle a little bit, and instead of shaming them or making them feel like they're failing, we would bring them a cookie and say, Mom, you're doing a really good job.
Yeah, to give encouragement. And now we've had our fair share of spilled drinks, and that play area is carpeted, and so we have a rule that says no drinks or food inside the play area or shoes. But we do have a mom bar on the front of it, or what we've always called the mom bar, that has a place for moms and dads to sit there and drink their coffee while they watch their kids. And so we want to have that engaged back and forth between the parents and their kids. But we have. You asked more than just the space itself, but kids in the cafe. And I think the biggest challenge of kids in the cafe are our kids. When they get there, they want to run around. But we've had spilled drinks, I'm sure, like every cafe does. But one thing we try to do is, if we see a kid spill a drink, we're putting a rush on another replacement to get them.
Or if we see a mom or a kid is just having a major meltdown and it's in public, and you don't want to really do that anywhere. Any parent hates that. And so our heart was, okay, how can we come alongside them? They're just this is normal life. It's okay. Kids have meltdowns. You can't control them.
We've had our
How can we love literally others better than ourselves? And that includes kids, families, the president of Cummins, whoever.
So this is, I really appreciate your heart in this. And I also know that there are parents that are somewhat, for lack of a better word, oblivious to these things. So where you said that there is a look on their face like, oh my gosh, I can't believe that my child is causing this disruption. There are other parents who are so either used to it or I don't know what, but they allow their child to do an extraordinary amount of things that you're just shocked that they allow them to do that. How do you deal with those nightmare scenarios where now you've got to, it's not enough to simply, hey, like that, but you have to step in. Like, do you step in? What's the protocol for that? Because that's really tense.
Yeah, I'll say it this way: there is no protocol. I think in all of those situations, you want to try to handle them on a case-by-case basis and try to understand. And so there's been some of those scenarios where, especially if one of us are here or a manager is there, we try to go and interact with that guest to understand what's going on, to one, make sure they saw the rules or remind them or, hand them another paper copy and, say, and I think it's awareness. Have they been to the cafe before? Are they regulars, or is it a new person that we've never seen? And if it's a new, then it's kind of the reminder. If it's a regular, which we've had both sides, I think what I would want to do is sit down with them and just try to understand what's going on and how can we help serve them, but also explain to them why we try to preserve that environment for all the guests, including the people not participating in the play area that are studying or having a meeting, because we have lots of meetings that are going on.
Mm-hmm. So now I imagine there are people who are there, but they're not necessarily there because they want to be around a family environment. What type of, how do you approach people who are visibly upset by the noise level when it might get a little loud, or this is a classic like airplane scenario when there's a crying baby and somebody is just having an adult, is having a really rough time, maybe rougher than the child, with this disruption of their solitary time. How do you balance those two needs?
Yeah, there's a couple things I would say. One is we opened this way, so it's not a shock now a year and a half in for those regulars that do consistently come to work there. They're kind of prepared for all walks of life to be in our cafe. I think the other thing is that we have been very open and honest this entire time. And so when a guest sees a family being louder or children screaming or whatever, one, they know that we do our best to be on top of it, to chat with the mom with a smile on our face, encourage them that we are so happy they're at our cafe, but that we want to be respectful of everyone. I cannot tell you how many times I've had that conversation. I would say we've only had a handful of maybe looks from people working in the shop.
We've had some feedback and some comments, through reviews and stuff that say, well, it can be a loud place at times. But I think we want to, as she said, want to make sure that it's a good fit for everybody. We're not known as the quiet, serene cafe I see in the movies, so, but even if there weren't any kids there, our cafe is typically so busy that there's a energy level that's happening with conversations and so forth that is loud anyways. And so the kids almost kind of just blend in, really. We also did some design features in the space to help deflect sound and to absorb some sound. And there are quieter areas of the cafe that are better for studying or more intimate meetings. And then some places that are just for people watching. Some places are good for group gatherings. And so we tried to kind of break up the space. It's not just one big open room in our cafe. And, if you get a chance to come to Columbus, we'd love to host you and show you around. But I think that's also helpful in the giving everybody kind of a place that they feel comfortable in sitting.
Well, one question I have is sort of a classic question of passing on values to staff. And you have this vision because it's your cafe. It's easier, I think, for you to go to a customer whose child is, playing and hand them the set of rules, to talk to them about noise levels, or to, not necessarily feel that tinge as easily as somebody who you bring on as an hourly worker who doesn't necessarily naturally internalize that vision. How do you pass along these values in training your staff to sort of be a representation of what you would hope people experience in your cafe with those values?
Yeah, I think we are crazy intentional with who we hire. It's not about, hey, do you like kids? It's about, do you like people? And so when we chat with people that are potentially going to work at Lucabe, we let them know that we truly, truly value and long for people to love others better than themselves, to literally put whatever personal thing aside when anyone walks through our door, that they feel just as important as the person before them or the person after them, that they feel like they are valued in that place. And so I think that is from literally probably interview number 1. We usually do 1 to 2, no less than 2 interviews. But in that first interview, it is, do you like people? Do you genuinely like people? And why do you think Lucabe is a good fit for your personality, as well as what can you add? And I think that kind of helps play a part.
Yeah, it all starts there. And then I think it's just a lot of coaching and a lot of, being very open to having our staff ask us questions, and we always say we're letting you inside our head so you can help carry this vision forward. And so, making sure our managers really, really, really catch the vision of what we're trying to do, and then the rest of the staff, like she said, loving people, and then realizing that the kids are people too, and they want to enjoy the spot.
And I think the other thing I'm thinking through is you just lead by example. I think if Tyler and myself are loving people really well, including our staff, as well as every single person that walks in, they're not seeing us roll our eyes when someone makes noise, or they're not seeing us be annoyed by something small that maybe isn't normal for every other cafe. But I think by leading by example and intentionally showing that to our staff is the best training opportunity, is by showing them how we want those people, not those people, children or anyone, to walk into our cafe, how we want them to be treated.
That's so great. I love the focus on intentionality and just in coaching. It's a constant sort of present leadership approach to making sure that everybody gets the same treatment. And we can definitely stray away from the ideal as we get tired, as we get a little flustered, because we're all human. But if your whole culture is built around reminding each other of what that standard is, it's more likely that you're going to hit it more often than not. And so kudos to you for that. I want to ask if you have any advice to people who are either going to start a cafe, or maybe even think about just making their cafe a little bit more kid-friendly. From your experiences, obviously this sounds like something that you're happy with. It is all worth it. So what should people do from your experience to have a successful go at it?
Yeah, I would say, starting off, I really feel like having a good space for kids is kind of the future of specialty coffee. And I say that because I feel like we really hit on something that like you said, we've probably been to 50 or more cafes around the U.S. visiting and planning and research for this shop. And I haven't seen anything like it. And by the way, I do have to say, we got to get a lot of credit to our designer, Jesse Viola, who really took our initial concept and went way above and beyond in designing this space for us. But having a space where the people, as we said earlier, the people that grew up in specialty coffee through college, now who have children, to make them really have another draw to your cafe, I think is something we should all, as an industry, focus on.
I would say that the main advice that I would probably give would be go in with a heart to love whoever walks in your door, and that can be a kid. It can be an infant. It can be somebody from Brazil. It can be somebody from wherever. I think that that's a big thing, is that if you have the mentality that you really are trying to be a place that for your community, I think that it includes all of the community, not just pieces.
So then, more practically speaking, Chris, I would say, we have a menu for kids, and so we have kid-sized drinks that are kind of tailored, and they're cheaper and less profit margin than what we would charge for other drinks, but and we've got juice boxes and snacks for kids, all kind of things that when you come in as a parent, you feel like the kids are welcomed and thought for all the way through, from the space to what they have offering.
I was just thinking, one thing that I would advise, that I have, what I think makes Lucabe different than any other coffee shop that has attempted to serve moms, is we chose not to just serve moms. We chose to serve everyone. And so thinking through, if a cafe just serve, because I've seen this model a few times actually, and it's the only example we had when we were originally doing our research was a cafe that the entire cafe was a play space with a coffee bar up front, and it really revolved around the kids.
Or it being a family focused cafe, and I think you could pull that off in a larger city where you find a niche and you can really serve that niche well. In Columbus, there wasn't that niche to it's a small big town, and so we wanted to make sure that we hit as broad of a demographic to ensure our success as much as we could while hitting. And one thing we didn't touch on is what we saw in our revenue flow is most time in that mid-morning before lunch type of hours is typically kind of slower for a coffee shop. Well, what we saw with this inclusion of the mom bar, so to speak, is that once the morning rush happened, and then
we get a second.
We saw a second wave of families coming in and filling that gap before the after lunch rush. And so it was kind of a cool way to see how do we plug that hole that is a unanticipated benefit of.
Yeah, we didn't plan to plug that hole. That hole plugged itself because they've dropped their kids off at school and they make it in to the shop just after that before they have to do other mom things.
Yeah, the other thing, a practical challenge is thinking about parking. So most moms that got a bunch of kids in the car are hesitant to do anything but a drive-through, but we're in a space where we couldn't do a drive-through. And so we wanted to make sure that if somebody did just need to come in for 30 minutes or 15, 20 minutes, that's all they had. We've got a parking garage right above us. We've got a lot of parking around the street near us. And then we wanted to make it as easy for them to send their kids back to the play area. They'll get in line and get a drink and still meet the intent of getting that morning perk up without having to go through the drive-through and capture that segment of the population.
Excellent. Those are definitely excellent. Those are definitely some very important things. I really appreciate how thoughtful you all have been with this. And I really appreciate getting to hear a little bit more about your vision behind it. It's really been fascinating. And it's encouraging to hear about, people really latching on to that, and as a community coming together and being together, across generations. That's really sweet. How can people find out more about you? How can they find you online and also on social media?
Yeah, well, lucabecoffeeco.com or lucabe, lucabe.com. Has links to all our social media, the Instagram, the Facebook, and all that. So that would be a great way to get connected with us.
Yeah, our Instagram is our most active. That I do most of my stuff from Instagram, and we're very, very responsive. Whether it be on Facebook, Instagram, private messaging, email, we pretty much get it on all forums at this point. So. Yeah.
Excellent. We'll definitely link to those in the show notes as well. Alyssa, Tyler, thank you so much for being so open and honest and informational and I would say just equipping people with the knowledge they need to kind of go this direction themselves if that's their vision. So I appreciate you spending time today on the show.
Yeah, absolutely. We can't wait to see many, many more of these type of environments so that we can bring our kids to. So thank you, Chris.
Thank you.
Well, I don't know about you, but I found this whole conversation so fascinating between the two different models. Both of them are serving their audiences very well. I mean, it's hard to argue that Alan's model is not serving his community well, given the fact that so many of them voted in favor of this. It's also a fact that the community in Columbus, Indiana, has obviously voted in favor of having a kids-friendly cafe. Both are different communities with different needs, and both of these entrepreneurs have decided on a model that's specific and driven by their vision for what the coffee experience is going to look like in their cafe. And I think a diverse set of models of coffee shops is a really good thing. Now, the truth of the matter is you're likely to not have a large 2-story playground in your coffee bar. And you're equally unlikely to have a policy where only adults are allowed. Most of us, and I see this as true forever about these third places in communities, most of us are going to be somewhere in the middle. We are going to have families coming into our coffee shops because the implication of opening a coffee shop is that this is a place I can bring my family. It is true what Alan says about the way that we kind of treat families. We don't say it overtly, but we say it by having a space that's really not meant for kids. It's sort of not friendly to families. And all he's done is sort of say what a lot of operations are actually thinking. So you have to respect that, just being honest. And I would gladly go to both of these coffee shops and enjoy their experience for what they're offering. So with that said, from my own experiences and from what we just heard from our guests today, I think the following guidelines are good things to follow when it comes to kids in the coffee shop. The first thing is, I think you need to be aware of what you want from the beginning. Both of these companies started with a very clear vision and goal for what they wanted people to experience when they walked in those doors. Now, you need to also be aware of what people in your neighborhood want. What is the need in your community? Your model needs to have a plan for kids and families, I think, if you are in a neighborhood where there is a lot of kids and families, and there is no other coffee shop or very little options. The reason is your model probably won't work that well because people are either they have one car or they're single parents or there's a lot of different ways to think about this where it's not a sustainable business model. Now, if there's a lot of other coffee shops around and you want to tap into a niche market, then by all means, but be aware of what it is you're bringing to the neighborhood and that it's something that's actually serving a need, because you may have a dream, but if it doesn't match up with the needs of the community, it's probably not going to be accepted. And these two models were gladly accepted, and they went about the process of setting their businesses up in a very wise way. I want to add here too, though, just making it hard for families to be in your space and hoping they get the drift is really not a plan. It's probably going to do more harm than good. Be honest. You either want their business with purpose and planning and execution behind it, or you don't. And you have to have the same purpose, planning, and execution behind that. Be honest about what you want and what's coming down the pike when you set up your business. Now, the other thing that we learned here is that no matter what, you're going to have to enforce a rule or a policy to people. This is a given. There are rules and policies that are in place to make lots of kids in the coffee shop work. And there are rules and policy in place for the opposite. So both of them have rules that need to be enforced. And the way that you go about that is so critical. And I love what Alyssa was talking about when she talked about setting an example from the beginning, hiring people that love people, being purposeful with the people you hire. Are they tactful individuals? Do they jive with your vision? And then leading by example as an owner and coaching people in the moment. You're not going to get it right every time. And the tense nature of dealing with families and parents and children in the coffee shop needs a lot of coaching. It does need a lot of consistent investment over time to really create a culture where people understand the rules and the policies around things, and that they are welcome. That the enforcing of a rule does not mean that they are being forced out. It means that they are being given guidelines for how to make this a sustainable way of being welcomed. So to conclude, I think the best policy going forward is this. You're likely going to have families and children in your coffee shop. Be intentional, have a plan, communicate, coach, love people well, be generous, and serve your community. have rules and regulations that are empathetic, and just make sure that it's clear to people that in the ups and downs of enforcing policy and welcoming the public into your cafe and all of the complexity that goes along with it, that you are on their side and you are a cheerleader for them, and you are there to support your community, even if it's stressful, and do it with a smile. So thank you very much to both of my guests, Alan Andrews, the Old Barracks Coffee Roasters, and Alyssa and Tyler Hodge over at Lucabe Coffee. Thank you for serving your communities with such vision, purpose, and great coffee. So if you like the show notes for this episode, you can go to keystotheshop.com and sign up for a newsletter. It's over on the sidebar. There's a place for you to put your email address, and every other week you will get an email that has news, links, also the notes, which are the key takeaways from each episode that you can use as a reference for that episode. It has the links also of resources mentioned in the conversation or in the episode. And you also have the ability in that email to download the full transcripts of each conversation. So sign up for that over at keystotheshop.com on the sidebar. Now, if you want to get in contact with me, just email chris@keystotheshop.com. If you have questions, comments, and feedback, or if you want to talk about consulting and training for you or your coffee bar, that is the email to reach me. And I look forward to hearing from you. So that's it for this episode today. Thank you very much for joining me on this journey of learning about kids in the coffee shop, and for sticking around to the end here. If you check back in Thursday, we have a shift break coming out about how to conduct a great cafe meeting, you and all your staff. I hope that's going to be something that gives you some tools to conduct great meetings. And so until then, I hope you have an amazing week. And as always, I hope that this episode has truly given you keys to the shop.